about all the range of issues that are in front of our two countries that will let us get there. And he appreciated the president having sent me, and we will, in short order, be able to talk about when the president will get a chance to meet with him at what will be the second summit. And then the second thing I wanted to say was I wanted to thank Ambassador Haley for the good work that she's done. She's been a great partner of mine for the now 5 months that she and I had been working together, and I want to wish her very well in whatever comes next for her. So thank you. We don't have any time for questions today. Thank you all.
The Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, with an update on North Korea, and then his words of appreciation and praise for the outgoing now UN Ambassador Nikki Haley. Of course, she reports to the Secretary there. He said he has no time for questions, and he did not take any.
One of surprise announcement from the White House this morning: Nikki Haley resigning from her post as UN Ambassador at the end of this year. I'm Dana Perino, and this is the Daily Briefing. So Ambassador Haley's resignation taking Washington by surprise. As one of this administration's highest profile women, she leaves behind a long list of accomplishments, President Trump calling her his friend and praising her service to the country.
Nikki Haley, Ambassador to the United Nations, has been very special to me. She's done an incredible job. She's a fantastic person, very importantly, but she also is somebody that gets it.
Chief White House correspondent John Roberts is live on the North Lawn. This definitely took people by surprise, coming, a month before the midterms.
It did, yeah, and you wonder why, if she's staying until January. They didn't wait until after the midterms to announce it, but announced it they did this morning. And here's another bit of rich irony in all of this. Her resignation letter was dated October the 3rd. So the president has sat on this now for more than 5 days. So I think they were probably keeping it quiet because they had all of that business with Kavanaugh going on. They wanted to clear the table of that, and then they rolled out the Nikki Haley resignation. In her resignation letter, she had nothing but praise for the president, saying, quote, that she had conditions for becoming the United Nations ambassador, or the United States ambassador to the United Nations, saying, quote, those conditions included serving in your cabinet and on the National Security Council and being free to speak my mind on the issues of the day. You made those commitments, and you have absolutely kept them all. In that letter, and in the Oval Office today, she went through a long list of accomplishments that she says that the United States has gone through since the president took office and with her at the United Nations. So I asked her in the Oval Office if she had all of those accomplishments and things were going so well, why did she want to leave it all behind? Listen here.
I'm a believer in term limits. I think you have to be selfless enough to know when you step aside and allow someone else to do the job. So thank you, Mr. President. It's been an honor of a lifetime. And I will say this, for all of you that are going to ask about 2020, no, I'm not running for 2020. I can promise you what I'll be doing is campaigning for this one.
There you go. Unprompted, she says, forget about 2020. I will be supporting the president wholeheartedly. In that same Oval Office meeting, the president said Nikki Haley will be missed, not only personally, but of course, as a tough ambassador to the United Nations. Listen here.
She got to know China, Russia, India. She knows everybody on a very first-name basis, and they like her. Except for maybe a couple, which is normal. Right? They can't all like you, but they do. They really like her, and I think maybe more importantly, they respect her.
The American Civil Liberties Union, though, is going to remember Ambassador Haley differently when she steps down, in a statement saying, quote, history books will remember Nikki Haley as a key player in the Trump administration's campaign to undermine universal human rights and international bodies. Clearly a difference of opinion when it comes to foreign policy here in the United States. As to successors, the president said he's got a number of people who are interested in the job, a couple of names that are being floated around among contacts I have here in Washington. Rick Grinnell, who was the longest-serving spokesman at the United States mission to the United Nations, 2001 to 2008. You, Dana, know Rick quite well. He was there during the run-up to the Iraq War with Negroponte, known as something of a hawk when it comes to foreign policy. Another name being kicked around is that of Dina Powell, who was a deputy national security advisor here in the early days of the Trump administration, but moved back to New York last year. So that's where we are with all of this right now. There's probably some other names that are going to float to the top as well, so we'll just keep watching it.
Yeah, probably by 3 o'clock we'll get some more. Thank you, John Roberts.
Exactly, you bet.
Okay, joining me for more on this, Brett Bayers, the anchor of Special Report. Brett, you don't often see people in Washington sort of leave of their own accord before their time is up or before the end of an administration. And the timing, I think, is a little strange in that the letter was dated October 3rd, but she plans to stay until the end. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think people are scratching their heads about the rollout. They're scratching their heads. What's really the story here? You know, is there more to it? Is there another shoe to drop? But really, it may be what she said.
Right.
And we should take it on face value until we know something different.
In fact, we have her explanation from the Oval Office. If we could play that for Brett here. We have that soundbite of Nikki Haley explaining why she's resigning.
The main thing was I was governor for 6 years, and we dealt with a hurricane, a 1,000-year flood, a church shooting, a school shooting. There was a lot. And then to come in and do 2 years of Russia and Iran and North Korea, it's been 8 years of intense time, and I'm a believer in term limits.
She does have an incredible sense of timing, and maybe she just thought she knew herself. She decided to leave on her own terms and to leave on a high note for sure. The president adores her, obviously, thinks she's done an amazing job, and the United States is moving at an accelerated pace on all different fronts, a lot of it happening at the UN.
And she leaves with the blessing of the president.
Right.
She leaves at his side in the Oval Office, which is not an image that many people leaving an administration get. They don't get that send-off. You know that better than anybody. And I think that it's interesting to see what she accomplished at the UN. She was the most sure-footed, forceful advocate for the Trump administration foreign policy at a time when, remember, there was some shaky thoughts about it when Secretary Tillerson left, when the National Security Advisor switched over. Now you have a team that is with National Security Advisor John Bolton, who's much more active about UN issues than perhaps the previous
Well, and certainly knows them well since he was the ambassador for a couple of years there during the Bush administration. It's a loss for the administration, but it's also an opportunity. The president's saying within the next 2 to 3 weeks, he will be announcing somebody new. I know there's a lot of speculation on that. John Roberts mentioned Dina Powell, and we have a photograph from over the weekend that Nikki Haley posted. She was actually on a trip with Dina Powell. I know they became friends over time, and especially when Dina was the Deputy National Security Advisor. Not saying to read anything into that, but there could be possibly, a few people that could fill that role, but they're going to have to hit the ground running because they're in the middle of dealing with Iran, North Korea in particular, as you just saw Secretary Pompeo talk about that, China in particular, Russia, the collapse of Venezuela in Latin America. I mean, they've got pieces going all over the world.
They do. I would say Dina Powell is the #1 candidate. I agree with John that she had talked about it privately, I think, before, and in conversations before she left the administration. The first time, it was something she was interested in. I would suggest she's the leading candidate. I agree Rick Grinnell is possible, but he is also seen in the administration circles as doing a good job in Germany. And they would like to leave him there as the ambassador, U.S. ambassador to Germany. And the other thing is the administration may be thinking, this is speculation, about such a high-profile face on the world stage, maybe being a woman for this administration wouldn't be a bad thing, as it didn't before.
There's rumors also that Ivanka Trump could be called back to New York City on behalf of her father to take over at the UN. But as the president likes to say, we'll see what happens. We don't need to get in front of him in making that announcement. I did want to switch gears for a moment. One of the things I was surprised that the administration decided to announce this Nikki Haley resignation today is because the Kavanaugh news has been quite good for the president, and he could have ridden that for a couple of more days without any other distractions. Look at this CNN poll on if Brett Kavanaugh faced a smear campaign. 48% think that yes, he did. 41% said no. And Republicans are starting to see a lot of congressional races across the country tighten. Enthusiasm is way up for Republicans, and unity behind the president across the board with Republicans is really way up there after the Kavanaugh nomination. And then you had the ceremonial swearing in last night.
Yeah, I don't think that's going away. I think that enthusiasm is real, and I think the polls are starting to pick it up across the board. In some states, obviously, in races more than others. I think in suburban House districts where the president's underwater, that didn't help this whole, no matter how it went, it didn't help in that scenario. But some Senate races are clearly moving. Listen, this is 28 days before the midterms. There will be a lot of shiny things that we look
look at. A lot of things that, stories that pop up, there are 6 and 7 news cycles in a day.
Right.
So I don't think
it was
this
just
administration's
a month ago
squelching.
today, I believe, that we were talking about Manafort taking that plea deal.
I mean, think of the stories yet to come in the October surprise category that we have over the next 28 days. I guarantee you there will be some blockbusters.
Not only that, but we have a major hurricane that we're going to talk about in just a moment, too, and that is obviously top priority for the safety of the people there. Brett Baer, thank you.
All right, Dana, see you.
As I mentioned, Hurricane Michael taking aim at the Florida Panhandle. The storm now a powerful Category 2, and forecasters say Michael will strengthen over the warm Gulf of Mexico waters before making landfall on Wednesday. President Trump issuing a stern warning for people in vulnerable coastal towns, tweeting, "Florida, it is imperative that you heed the directions of your state and local officials. Please be prepared, be careful, and be safe." And here's a live look at Gulf Shores, Alabama. As the storm approaches, you can see it's pretty windy there already. We will bring you a live update on Michael's track later in the show. A new reaction to Nikki Haley leaving her post at the UN. I'll talk to Michael Allen about that next. Plus, Democrats aiming high, hoping to win in some deep red states. I'll ask the chair of the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, Ben Ray Lujan, about their homestretch strategy. Any sense about the timing of this announcement, Mike?
You know, I just looked at it as she's had a successful run. She's a GOP superstar who didn't previously have foreign policy experience, but now she does. And she probably looked at it as, now's a chance to go out in the private sector, spend time with my family, and maybe get ready for another term through government.
Take a listen to what she talked about her accomplishments at the United Nations. A pretty long list, but we'll play a little bit of that for you here.
We've cut $1.3 billion in the UN's budget. We've made it stronger. We've made it more efficient. South Sudan, we got an arms embargo, which was a long time coming. 3 North Korean sanctions packages, which were the largest in a generation, done in a way that we could really work towards denuclearizing North Korea. The Iran deal, bringing attention to the world that every country needs to understand you can't overlook all of the bad things they're doing.
So she really was talking about resetting the table at the United Nations on behalf of the Trump administration. But there's, that means that there's still a lot of work to do. So whoever comes in will be able to pick up where she left off, because she has, moved pretty quickly on a lot of these different areas at the request of President Trump.
You're exactly right. Look, New York City, where the UN is seated, is a huge stadium, if you will, for us to prosecute our cases against Iran and North Korea. It's been great to have a voice like hers there. We need to get another superstar in there that will command that kind of attention, because it's as much a UN sanctions type of battle as it is anything else.
What do you think about any talk about tension between the UN ambassador Nikki Haley and the new Secretary of State? Not that they had policy differences, but that she had been a governor. She had done her own thing for a long time, and now that the stage is set, she feels like she can exit.
I think there's probably something to that. There's a little inherent tension between the Secretary of State and our ambassador to the UN. Technically, the ambassador is supposed to report up through the secretary, but when, like Trump has done, you've put that person in the cabinet, it sort of says, hey, you know what? She's also got a direct report to the president. So it's not totally clear. I wonder whether Bolton and Pompeo sort of made clear, hey, listen, we're the ones that are going to speak on these issues, and maybe that contributed someplace to her decision here.
The president said he would likely announce somebody within the next 2 to 3 weeks. That would be before the midterm. What do you think about the possibility of the administration being able to nominate and confirm someone before January 1st?
Oh, I don't see that happening. I would be really, really surprised if it got done in that short of a time frame. But maybe, we were able to get Justice Kavanaugh done in a reasonable period of time. But I think it's probably a little bit too much to expect. Let's see what happens in the Senate races.
It did make me think the president, he's not going to want to wait around if he announces it before the midterm. Maybe he'll try to tell Mitch McConnell. Get it done.
That's what made me hedge. That's what made me hedge.
I love it when you hedge a little bit. Get you off your.
That's right.
Get you off your rocker. Michael Allen, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Democrats spending big on TV ads in a deep red state. Who they're targeting and why. Plus, Hurricane Michael heading for the Gulf Coast of Florida, where thousands are under mandatory evacuation orders. We have new information on the path of this very dangerous storm.
It was a monstrous storm, and the forecast keeps getting more dangerous. We are now just hours away from seeing impacts.
Time was, French Hill at least pretended he's one of us. But things change when politicians get to Washington. As congressman, French Hill votes like a D.C. insider.
Democrats reaching into the deep red state of Arkansas, shelling out $250,000 on a new TV ad for the 2nd congressional district race between incumbent Republican Congressman French Hill and Democrat Clark Tucker. Good names, both of those. Joining me now is New Mexico Congressman Ben Ray Lujan, who chairs the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee. It's good to have you here, sir. The generic ballot for Democrats had been way up, but in the last month we've seen it narrow back down again. How are you feeling today going into this home stretch?
Well, Dana, look, as we look at these generic ballots, I never look at just one poll. We look at the trends, and the trends have been very positive for Democratic candidates this year. And look, there's nothing generic about our candidates. They have records of service, many of them who have served our country, many of them veterans, CIA officers, worked in the FBI, all successful in their own right. And so I'm really confident with the momentum that we see now, with the numbers that we see, that we will win back the House. I never said it would be easy.
Yeah.
We're going to have to fight for every inch, but I'm really encouraged by the trends that we've continued to see.
There's no doubt your recruitment has been very good if you look across the board, and especially finding candidates for those particular districts where they might work. But as I understand it, especially in places like Texas, where you had vulnerable Republicans now in the last week saw themselves inch up, maybe just slightly over their Democratic challengers in the wake of the Kavanaugh hearings. What is your take on how the Kavanaugh confirmation has affected or not your races?
Well, I think that the Kavanaugh hearings are going to impact Senate races more than House races. And there's no question with some of the recent polling that has shown the enthusiasm gap change a bit here. But look, with the momentum that we're seeing with the polling in district after district across the country, including in the great state of Texas, our candidates are doing well. And by the very nature that we're talking about competitive seats in the great state of Texas, I think that makes a big statement. Earlier, it sounds like you played an ad out in Arkansas as well. Clark Tucker and candidates like him, where we're making investments, not just in Texas, but Arkansas, Western Pennsylvania, and North Carolina, places where President Trump won by double digits, just show how competitive and how vast this map really is.
President Trump said he wanted to campaign 6 or 7 days a week. He's doing 4 rallies this week, also expanding the map a little bit and going to places that weren't necessarily on the docket the first time around, including some suburban areas. Does that tell you that he's feeling he's got a little bit more confidence in those areas?
I think that what we're seeing now is Republicans are trying to do everything they can across the country, understanding right now that momentum is on our side. And let me use one district in Texas as an example. Congressman Sessions, who was a former NRCC chair, he said about a year ago that he wouldn't need a penny of investment, but he's brought the entire cavalry in, including calling on President Trump to go in there. It just shows how competitive a seat is that shouldn't even be on the map. And it's because of our candidate, Colin Allred, who has an amazing story.
But he was
and is a
actually the
stellar
one
candidate.
that I was thinking of that I'd heard last night that looked like he had just started to edge up over his opponent. Take a listen to your counterpart at the NRCC, Congressman Stivers. Had him on the show yesterday. Take a listen. I'll have you respond.
Well, I think both Republicans and Democrats have been excited, but Democrats were already excited about 15 other things. This is number 16.
Okay.
And Republicans have had a little lack of enthusiasm. And in fact, we had 9 special elections, and we spent a lot of time and money trying to turn out reluctant Republicans, and now Republicans are excited.
Talk to me about enthusiasm levels for Democrats, and also how reliable do you think younger voters are for Democrats this year?
I'm encouraged not just by the turnout that we're seeing with millennials in special elections and in primaries across the country, but how we're doing well with women voters, especially coming our way. It's really been encouraging. And look, the reason why there has not been excitement on the Republican side, as noted by my colleague Steve Stivers, is Republicans have had a failed agenda from the get-go. All of 2016, all Republicans could talk about.
Why do you think it's failing if the economy is doing well? People are we're in relative peaceful times. Why do you think I'll give you a chance to just say as the last word why you think the Republicans are failing and why Democrats' message is winning.
So Dana, in all of 2016, Republicans only ran on repealing the Affordable Care Act. They tried doing that this year, and in doing so, like French Hill, who voted to repeal the Affordable Care Act, they drove up costs for the American people, and they took a tax at those with pre-existing conditions as well. And then this tax package, which Steve Stivers and Republicans promised they would run on, it's all but absent across the American airwaves because it's unpopular with the American people. Republicans don't have a record to run on. That's why they're running slanderous attacks against our candidates, including running negative attacks against an incredible candidate, a combat veteran in the great state of Colorado, suggesting that Jason Crow is not strong on veterans issues. This is just ridiculous. And for that reason and many others, our candidates are going to push us to the top, and that's why we'll win back the majority of the House.
Well, we'll find out a month from today, which will go by as fast as a week, and we'll have you back. Congressman Ben Ray Lujan, thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, Hurricane Michael with winds of more than 100 miles an hour taking aim at the Gulf Coast. We'll have a live check on the storm's track up next, plus what world leaders are saying about Nikki Haley's accomplishments at the United Nations.
I want to thank the president for just, allowing us to come out and talk to you this way. It has been an honor of a lifetime.
Shortly, and we will monitor that for you just hours after UN Ambassador Nikki Haley announced her resignation at the White House with President Trump. And Rich Edson is at the State Department. This was a big surprise this morning, Rich.
It was, Dana, and good afternoon. The officials here are saying that she essentially informed her staff this morning, then went over to the White House. It was a surprise here at the State Department. Also at the White House today, the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, who just spoke a few minutes ago and expressed his gratitude towards Haley.
I wanted to thank Ambassador Haley for the good work that she's done. She's been a great partner of mine for the now 5 months that she and I have been working together, and I want to wish her very well.
The relationship with the former Secretary of State Rex Tillerson was a little different, tense at times. Ambassador Haley was visible, outspoken, often discussed foreign policy ahead of the secretary. She took a mainstream Republican foreign policy line early on as diplomats were trying to figure out what exactly Trump foreign policy would become. That would be strongly against Iran, pro-Israel, as the U.S. withdrew from the Iran nuclear agreement and then moved its embassy to Jerusalem. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu writes, quote, "I would like to thank Ambassador Nikki Haley, who led the uncompromising struggle against hypocrisy at the UN and on behalf of the truth and justice of our country. Best of luck." Haley and the administration were also very critical of the United Nations itself. The U.S. withdrew from the UN Human Rights Council, pulled funding from a UN Palestinian aid organization, citing political bias and mismanagement. Though she also worked with allies to pressure leaders in Venezuela and Syria and enact harsh economic sanctions against North Korea, she's staying on board until through 2018, according to her resignation letter, and that's going to very much be what she's got in store, keeping those sanctions, keeping those countries, enforcing those sanctions against North Korea as the Trump administration negotiates with the Kim regime. Back to you,
right, Rich, thank you so much. For more on this, I'm joined by Marianne Marsh, former senior advisor to Secretary John Kerry, and Josh Holmes, founding partner at Cavalry LLC and a former chief of staff to Mitch McConnell. Let me start with you, Marianne. She's going out on her own terms.
It seems that way. I mean, I saw your segment with Brett. I think there are questions out there. You have to ask why now. When a letter was written a week ago, you announce it today, you step on your Kavanaugh news, and she's not leaving till the end of the year. So there may be more here. We'll have to see.
Josh, listen to what Lindsey Graham had to say from South Carolina. See if you're buying this. I am.
Well, I'm going to run again. There you go. You made news. I'm definitely running. I enjoy my job. I think I'm better at it today than I've ever been. I love my job. I love representing the people of our state. I have zero interest in serving President Trump's cabinet. I like him. I want to help him. I want him to be successful. But I think I can do more good for the country and help President Trump more effectively by being in the Senate.
Mitch McConnell, do you think he's pleased to know that Lindsey Graham plans on trying to stick around?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I don't know of anybody having more fun at their job right now than Lindsey Graham is at having his. It seems to me like he is, as he said, kind of at the top of his game, riding a high after the Kavanaugh nomination. So I'm not surprised he wants to stick around. And honestly, all of his Republican colleagues are going to be happy to hear he's coming back.
All right, I'm going to take you back a little bit to last week. Marianne, you and Josh were both on the show last week. We talked about North Dakota. This is before the votes were decided on and cast. Heidi Heitkamp up in North Dakota deciding to vote no. She's about, 10 to 12 points behind her challenger, Kevin Kramer, up there in North Dakota. Listen to what she said on the New York Times daily podcast this morning about sexual assault and her mom.
I think it's wonderful that his wife has never had an experience, and good for her. It's wonderful his mom hasn't. My mom did, and I think it affected my mom her whole life, and it didn't make her less strong. And I want you to put this in there. It did not make my mom less strong that she was a victim.
Heidi Heitkamp also said, Marianne, that this race is not over and that it is not impossible for her to win in North Dakota. Your thoughts on that? You thought that if she voted no, she'd still be okay and be able to win.
She's got a tough race, as I said last week. She still has a tough race. But here's the thing she did. She made the right decision and the right vote, not the political one. And she has embraced it. She cut an ad talking about the fact of why she voted against Kavanaugh. She's talking about her mother, a victim of sexual assault, and the fact it made her mother stronger, but it made her stronger as well. She was an attorney general who worked with sexual assault victims. Voters will accept the fact that they may disagree with you on an issue if you explain to them why you voted the way you did. And she's done this here. 6 years ago, she was down 10 points. She won by 2. She might be able to do it again. Tough race, tough woman, tough campaigner. We'll see in 28 days.
All right, and let me ask you, Josh, about another very close race out in Indiana. Listen to what Mike Braun said last night. He's the Republican.
I think what you should have gotten from the recent spectacle there is that the Democrats, including Joe Donnelly, will do or say anything when it comes to their political interests. It is a blood sport, and as long as it's like that, you're going to have decisions made based not on what Hoosiers want, based upon what Chuck Schumer wants.
Josh, unlike North Dakota, the race in Indiana is very close. Do you think that Brett Kavanaugh's confirmation and the whole process can help Braun peel away?
Yeah, there's no doubt, and it already has. I think Joe Donnelly and Claire McCaskill made a grave political mistake by not supporting Judge Kavanaugh. I think they've taken their races from a place where they could execute down the stretch and win to a place that's going to be very, very difficult for them to get over the top. The voters in those states are very tuned in. There's been no news story in the Trump era that has been on the front page for over 2 weeks like the Kavanaugh one has, and Republicans are extremely motivated by it. I have a feeling that in those 2 states, they've created a problem that they cannot fix.
Is it durable, Marianne, this Republican enthusiasm? We are a month away from today before this midterm.
I don't think so. I think what you see, when you see swings in polls like this over any issue, it's always soft support, and it can evaporate in 28 days. What you have consistently seen on the Democratic side is the higher turnout throughout the primaries. 4 million more Democrats have voted in the primaries than Republicans. Compare that to 2006, where Democrats voted by 1 million more than Republicans and picked up 30 seats. I'm not saying 30 seats today, but it shows you how durable it is.
I'll give you the last word, Josh.
Yeah, I mean, look, in New York and California, that is the case. That is not the case in Indiana and Missouri. And this is not about a swing in one way or another. These are Republicans coming home, acting like Republicans again, and giving motivation to get to the polls. So that part, I'm afraid for my Democratic friends, is a durable factor.
I love how you care so much for your Democratic friends.
I do. You know how I love them.
Very sweet.
I can feel the
March
love.
and Josh Holmes, thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Hurricane Michael heading straight for the Florida Panhandle. Right now, a Category 2 storm with 110-mile-an-hour winds, and it's expected to strengthen before hitting land tomorrow. Residents in Michael's path preparing for a potentially catastrophic storm. Folks even lining up at gas stations as Governor Rick Scott urges residents to be smart and safe.
The time to prepare is right now. This storm is dangerous, and if you don't follow warnings from officials, this storm could kill you. And you cannot take it lightly.
Governor Scott's third hurricane in as many years in Florida, and tracking this dangerous storm for Fox News is meteorologist Adam Klotz. Here we go again, Adam.
Yeah, here we go again, and this is going to be a big one. It's currently a Category 2 storm at 110 miles an hour, but at 111 miles an hour, it becomes a Category 3. That is going to happen with this one, so no surprise that we're seeing all the watches, all the advisories stretching across large portions there of the northern panhandle, from Panama City stretching over to Apalachicola, actually including Pensacola as well. That's where you're seeing the hurricane warnings. We're going to see hurricane conditions really picking up for us on Wednesday. That's going to be the time frame with this particular system. Here it is, putting it in motion from a Category 2, likely jumping up to a Category 3 before too much longer. When will it be making landfall? We're looking at tomorrow around lunchtime, maybe into the early afternoon hours. That's when conditions will be the worst and winds likely up to 125 miles an hour. So this is going to be a really large storm, a little bit quicker moving storm than we've seen with some of the several more recent ones. But here's your future radar. There's your center of circulation. It is right around 1 p.m. there on Wednesday when you begin to see this running onto Panama City Beach. That's when the winds are the strongest. And it's not just the winds. Obviously, it's the wind, it's the rain. But this is really going to be driving a storm surge with it that's going to be affecting a large portion here of the coast as all this wind moves on up the coast. We're looking at spots, Dana, getting up to 8 to 12 inches of storm surge. This is always worse in the Gulf of Mexico just because this water has nowhere to go. So we won't be surprised if some of this water is really piling up here in the next 12 to 24 hours.
It's a good thing that it's moving fast, is that right? And also just curious about how waterlogged South Carolina and North Carolina are right now, and they're expecting a lot more rain?
This is eventually going to run over some of those areas, but as far as, sorry, what was the other question?
That's okay. I just wondering like how waterlogged, South Carolina and North Carolina are. That's a lot of water to try to absorb.
They remain waterlogged. The heaviest rain isn't going to be impacting here, and you asked about Florence. This one is going to hit, and it's going to move on out. So Florence, we got 40 inches because it sat there and spun and spun and spun. This more like 8 to 12 inches, but I think wind and storm surge are going to be the things that people remember when this is over.
Okay, we'll keep an eye on it. Thank you, Adam.
Yep.
Kim Jong-un hoping to roll the red carpet for a high-profile visitor, and it is not President Trump, so who's getting an invitation? We'll tell you. Plus, the Kavanaugh confirmation battle sparking a new debate on the Electoral College. Is it time for a new way to elect the president? That and much more coming up. And make sure you follow us on social media for lots of daily briefing extras.
Are you a veteran, own a home, and need money for your family? New Day USA can help.